Sigma Asia presents a conversation with Shaun McCamley, founder and managing partner, Euro-Pacific Asia Consulting.
Very exciting. Some interesting people here as always. I think these events are fantastic opportunities if you need to network. And there's some really excellent stands already with good providers. Seems to be very well laid out. So congratulations to the organization. I guess because I've been in the industries for so long, and now 40 plus years across land-based casinos and the online space, in fact, in the online since early 2000s. So pretty much one of the early movers into online. And so I have a pretty broad range with our consulting role for land-based properties that are looking to move into new jurisdictions, particularly in challenging times, which we are seeing now. And I think perhaps the Philippines is a good example of that, with the loss of the VIP business, with the cessation of all the junket business, reluctance to travel at the moment from the Chinese. And so the properties here are under quite a lot of pressure to maintain their revenue budgets and projections. So our firm or I can help them with that if they need help, with new strategic planning and trying to move their business perhaps in a different direction. And then that overlaps very nicely with the online space. Like most people, you'll find in the online space, we all fell into it, not on purpose. Most of us just seem to get into online. Very much no choice, yeah. I find it really interesting when I first came in the early days, because it was very Wild West. And I have a few horror stories like everybody else does, and some of them affected me as well. So, yeah. So we bring quite a broad range on our consulting roles. Well, the POGOs were just a disaster for the Philippines, unfortunately. With the horror stories that went with the people trafficking, the non-compliance, difficult for the Philippine government to control, of course, because they were delivering significant revenues. And now, of course, one of the reasons why we're seeing revenue decline in the land-based casinos is because a lot of the POGO employees were regular visitors, particularly on the slot machines here in the Philippine casinos. So it's had a tremendous impact on them. A good move by the Philippine government to completely ban them. I think, we're all used to sometimes the Philippines works in different ways. One time it's this, and another time it can be that. But if you understand that, and if you're used to working in those conditions, then it comes as no surprise, I think. So a good move by the government to ban them, and now they have a good licensing regime through the PIGOs. A severe impact, yes, of course. And it's interesting to note that just last month, PACCOR announced that the e-gaming revenue had actually outpaced the land-based revenues for the first time. I think the industry already knew that they have to really focus on their online offering, but it's very challenging, and an online business is very unlike a land-based casino business. There is really no correlation other than the fact that the games look similar. Blackjack's blackjack, roulette's roulette, of course. But the actual operation, formalization, and the strategic planning of an online business is completely different. And until the owners, the C-level executives of the land-based casinos here understand that, they will struggle. And that's one of the, I have an article coming out next month in Casino Life, for example, and I make note of the fact that, to overcome this massive hurdle of lost revenues, they really need to sit back and view how they optimize their online strategy, because at the moment, honestly, they're set up to fail. It's always difficult because what we're talking about out of the United States changes daily. And of course, that causes turbulence in its own right, I feel. I do see the industry not overly affected at the moment. Tariffs are tariffs, or, the other geopolitical issues which we see I don't see any real impact of that. The real impact on the revenue lines here is the lack of visitation, and whether the geopolitical scenarios which we see have any impact, I really don't think they do. Of course, there may be some flow-throughs from operational requirements of some of the properties, but if we're talking revenue structures, I don't really see that as being an impact at this point in time. Maybe in the future, of course, but for now, I think everything's fairly level keys for that. Absolutely, I see a hybrid model as the only one of the really key strategic plans that if we're talking land-based, need to consider. And that's where social casinos or social gaming has a huge impact, or can have a huge impact in a positive way for them. It's the fastest growing vertical in Southeast Asia, primarily due to the demographic throughout Southeast Asia of um, mobile, the use of mobile technology, the use of mobile phones, the demographic young, great combination. Social gaming is not about gambling, it's all about entertainment, it's about engagement. Licensing is not required, even here in the Philippines, it's not a requirement. So I see that as a great opportunity for land-based casinos to seize upon at the moment, and they should do. If they're not looking at that type of modeling, they're going to be left behind, no question about that. I was asked to write a white paper a few years ago on the rise of social gaming, not just in Southeast Asia, but globally. And I've been an operator of online casinos in the early days. When I first got into the online space, I was in online bingo, and we had huge success with our online bingo. And so everybody has what we call play for free. And the idea has always been convert your play for free to a cash player. Never happens. Less than 0.1% will ever convert over. So I sort of went into the document, or into the piece, with a bit of a negative mind. But when I started to see the revenue numbers that were being generated, billions of dollars, some of the large successful social gaming platforms, upwards of 600 million revenue a month. This is serious money when we're talking about it. And then I heard the story about Caesars Entertainment, who bought a platform called Playtika. Playtika had about 24% market share, and they paid $92 million for this particular platform. And at the time, we all raised our eyebrows in the industry, thinking, wow, why would they pay so much for a social platform? Long story short, Caesars kept that platform for 5 years. They were approached by a group of Chinese businessmen who offered them $4.1 billion. It's a well-known story. It's a true story. So when you start to see these, and you're doing the data and you're doing the research, as you know yourself, my eyes were opened, and what we call play for free had completely morphed into something different. People regularly spend $1,000 a month to win nothing, because they can't win anything. What the hook for the social platforms are, they're engaging, leaderboards, missions, entertainment. That's all we're talking about, is entertainment. You can't win, no gambling. There are sweepstakes modeling, as we know, and that is under the microscope at the moment. But really, from a social environment and from a social collective, if you like, it's really an amazing industry, and one that I hope a lot of people will come to appreciate if they want to be successful. But even so, and I'm a big supporter of responsible gaming. I've been published for that, and people who know me know my response with the responsible structures. In fact, I work with a foundation to encourage and to help people that have gambling issues. And even with a social gaming platform, you need to be responsible, because it is addictive. And of course, there's also the issue of underage. How do you control underage? It's not easy. In fact, it's honestly, everyone will tell you, it's nearly impossible. And particularly with social, because it's a very cheap purchase. You're not talking €50 or $100. You're not talking that. You're talking $1 2 or 3 euro purchases. And we know that from other social games, as you know, with in-app purchases, loot boxes and everything else. So yes, you have to be very, very mindful. And as an industry person, I advocate heavily that, the responsibilities should be seriously considered. I think a lot of these jurisdictions, if we use East Timor as a good example, of course they need to raise revenues. It's very difficult. There's no real tourism that will go to East Timor, for example. So they do need to look at that. The problem will always be is the recognition of that particular license to users. Does it respond? Does it mean anything? That's the problem, and that takes time, to do that. If you remember, in the early days, it was always Antigua and the Caribbean islands. And I was part of the Caribbean island processing way back when we first got into this business in the online space. So emerging markets for me throughout Southeast Asia, I tend to look at Southeast Asia as a whole. It's difficult to pinpoint one over the other. We know here in the Philippines it's going particularly well. Who would have thought 5-6 years ago that would be happening? But it is. I mean, the benchmark was always Macau. Look, Macau is still strong, of course, but they're not in the 74 billions anymore. But they're still in the 32 billion. So come on, it's still fabulous business. So I tend to look at the region as a whole, and my biggest gaze, if you like, is actually on India. We consult with some clients who are getting into social business there, and we only look at a $2 spend in their budgeting. But when you're talking 100 million, it's what makes the difference. It's a wonderful development. Yeah, it's just going to be wonderful. I mean, the design. Of course, I'm also a big fan of Win. They do everything brilliantly. And I think that it will be very, very successful. I think it will take time because as it does, it's not going to happen overnight. But what they're building there is quite amazing, and it will be a talking point on its own, even without the gaming side of the business. But I've done business in that region for a number of years, and it's challenging. Well, that's always the question, isn't it? Will it catch on? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they've let this happen. When I first started doing business in the Emirates, it was always told to me that the oil is in the south, no problem. Go further north, there's no oil. So how do the Emirates up there, how do they make money? That's why the alcohol was allowed, and that's why they're allowing gaming. They're very smart, the Arabs. They like to make sure that everyone gets a fair shake, but that's one of the reasons that you've seen it up north, because there's no oil up there. So they like everything to be fair.